For 2 long years, Andrew Carter's mansion echoed with silence. His 7-year-old son, Ethan, hadn't spoken a single word since the night a crash stole his mother. Therapists failed. Doctors gave up. Even millions of dollars couldn't buy back his child's voice. And then, on an ordinary morning inside a small roadside diner, the impossible happened. A waitress in a faded apron leaned down, drew a smiley face in ketchup, and whispered, "Say hi." The boy's lips trembled. His father held his breath. And in that instant, the silence shattered. One fragile syllable, "hi," broke through years of grief and changed everything. But what Andrew didn't know was that behind the miracle lay a heartbreaking truth, a secret that would bind all their lives together in ways no one could have imagined. The Carter estate was beautiful, but beauty meant nothing when the halls carried only silence. Marble floors gleamed, chandeliers glittered, and the grand piano sat polished in the corner, untouched since the night Route 17 swallowed Lila Carter and left her son voiceless. Every morning, Andrew Carter watched his 7-year-old boy, Ethan, push cereal around a bowl without sound. Not a word, not a laugh, not even a hum. Just the small circle his finger traced in the condensation of a glass, as if trying to remind the world he still existed. Andrew had built companies from scratch, turned risks into empires, and could sign a check large enough to summon any doctor in the country. But nothing could buy back his child's voice. Therapists called it selective mutism after trauma. Specialists promised breakthroughs, but evenings still ended with a kiss on Ethan's forehead and silence heavy enough to crush the air. Money had softened carpets, bought machines to monitor sleep, even rearranged schedules so experts could come and go. Yet the house remained a museum curated for grief. That morning, Andrew dismissed the driver and took the wheel himself. He craved the ordinary ritual of fastening Ethan's seatbelt, of hearing the click that proved at least something still worked. Traffic gave him space to breathe, to remember he was more than a CEO trapped in polished rooms. But then a detour sign blinked ahead roadwork, forcing them onto a street he hadn't seen in years. That was when Ethan stirred. His small hand lifted, pointing at a neon sign glowing against the gray. A chrome-trimmed diner, the kind Andrew had once visited back when ambition still smelled like burnt coffee and hope. "Hungry?" Andrew asked gently, expecting no answer. Ethan's gaze stayed on the sign. It was enough. Andrew turned in. The bell above the door jingled with a cheer that felt almost indecent after so many muted mornings. Warm air met them, coffee, bacon, cinnamon scents of ordinary life Andrew had forgotten. The place was humble. 6 booths, a chalkboard menu, linemen laughing over eggs, an elderly woman rearranging sugar packets. And behind the counter, a waitress in a faded blue dress and half apron, pouring coffee with steady hands. "Morning," she said, her voice not loud, not forced, just clear. Booth or counter? Andrew's instinct was privacy, but Ethan's palm pressed against a counter stool, testing its shine. For once, Andrew followed his son's lead. "Counter's fine." The waitress Emily, her name tag said set water before them, then leaned down to Ethan's level. "We do pancakes," she said with a conspiratorial smile. "I can even make the chocolate chips spell your name if you want." Something shifted. Ethan's shoulders, usually hunched like he was bracing against the world, uncurled just a little. His eyes caught on the pencil behind her ear. Andrew ordered coffee, though it wasn't caffeine he needed. It was the quiet miracle of watching someone speak to his son as if he weren't broken, as if silence itself were worthy of conversation. Emily slid a saucer of blueberries toward Ethan unasked, unexpected. "On the house," she said softly, "for color." Andrew's throat tightened. He wanted to explain the crash, the diagnoses, the toothpaste flavors too loud for Ethan's mouth. Instead, he let the moment breathe. Emily pulled the pencil from her ear, flipped over the kids' menu, and began connecting dots into the outline of a dinosaur. She slid it across. "Your turn," she whispered. Andrew watched as Ethan's small hand hovered, then pressed the tip down. A line. A start. The boy's first choice in months. Later, as Andrew drove away, he realized he had missed a call from Singapore, a meeting worth millions. But for the first time in 2 years, he didn't care. Somewhere between a diner bell and chocolate chip letters spelling Eta-san, something had cracked open. Hope, small and fragile, but real. The next morning, Andrew expected resistance when they drove past the diner. But before he could suggest anything, Ethan's hand lifted again toward the neon glow, his eyes fixed on the sign. That gesture so rare, so deliberate, was louder than any word. Andrew pulled in without hesitation. Inside, the bell jingled and Emily looked up, surprised but not unprepared. "Back again?" she asked with a half-smile, then focused on Ethan. "You must be hungry." Andrew sat beside his son at the counter, feeling strangely nervous, as though entering an interview where the stakes were nothing less than life itself. Emily set down placemats and a pencil, then reached for the ketchup bottle. With a playful flourish, she drew a lopsided smiley face on Ethan's plate. "Now it's your turn," she said, sliding him the mustard. Andrew braced for stillness, but Ethan's fingers wrapped around the bottle, and with clumsy effort, he squeezed a crooked line across the plate. Emily gasped softly. "Perfect, a mustache." The word made Ethan's lips twitch, and then astonishingly, he let out a small laugh, fragile but undeniable. Andrew froze. That laugh, the first sound in 2 years, pierced him deeper than any business triumph ever had. Emily leaned closer, her voice low and steady. "Can you say hi?" Her whisper was not pressure, but invitation. Ethan's gaze darted to his father, then back to her. His lips trembled, air catching in his throat. And then, faint as a secret, it came, Andrew gripped the counter, eyes blurring. "Did you hear that?" His voice cracked. Emily only nodded, calm in the face of a miracle. "He'll give you more," she said gently. In his own time. Andrew wanted to demand an explanation, how she had broken through when every expert had failed, but the answer sat before him, tracing mustard lines and staring in wonder at the sound he'd just made. Later, as dishes clattered in the background, Andrew found his courage. "You connect with him in a way no one else has," he said. "Would you consider spending more time with him, just like this?" "Nothing formal." Emily shook her head, wiping the counter with brisk strokes. "I can't. I'm just a waitress. He deserves professionals, not me." Her voice carried both humility and shame, as if the apron marked her as unworthy. Andrew wanted to argue, to insist she had done in minutes what months of therapy couldn't, but she was already moving down the counter, filling coffee cups, retreating into the safety of routine. That night, Andrew tucked Ethan into bed. The boy clutched a napkin. Emily had doodled on before they left, a small dinosaur blowing bubbles that spelled hi. The pencil marks had smudged, but Ethan held it like a treasure, tucking it under his pillow. Andrew's chest ached with gratitude and awe. His son's first word since the tragedy had not been coaxed out by money, nor recorded in a clinic. It had been born in a diner, drawn out by a waitress who treated silence like a language worth learning. Over the next week, detours became deliberate. Andrew skipped breakfast meetings and drove Ethan to the diner each morning. Emily always greeted them as if she'd expected them all along, never overplaying the moment, never pushing. She taught Ethan to trace letters with sugar packets, to clap rhythms with spoons, to hum along with the jukebox when no one paid attention. Each morning, Andrew felt the weight of silence lessen. One evening, after paying, he lingered. "You don't realize what you've given us," he said. Emily only smiled faintly. Sometimes kids just need someone who isn't afraid of their quiet. Her words echoed in Andrew's mind long after they left. In the rearview mirror, he watched Ethan clutching another napkin doodle, a stick figure family standing beneath the word hi, and for the first time in years, He dared to believe that silence was not forever. It was only waiting for the right voice to answer. By the end of the week, the diner felt less like a detour and more like a destination. Ethan no longer needed Andrew to guide him inside. He went straight to the counter, eyes already searching for Emily. She had a way of treating him not as fragile, but as capable, and the boy responded with tiny but undeniable steps forward. One morning, after the breakfast rush thinned, Emily glanced at the clock and whispered, 5 minutes. Want to see something special? She led them through the swinging door to the alley behind the diner. It wasn't much, just 2 milk crates, a clean trash bin, and a sliver of winter sunlight, but she made it into a stage. From a crate, she pulled out her treasures, 2 wooden spoons, a dented tin can, a row of measuring cups, and a scuffed harmonica. Sound, she told Ethan, kneeling to his level, is something you can touch. She tapped the tin 1 2, 1 2 3, and handed him the spoon. Ethan hesitated, then copied her rhythm. Perfect, she said warmly. Now it's your turn to lead. His taps were uneven, but he looked up, waiting for her to follow. She did, matching him beat for beat, and Andrew realized he was watching his son have a conversation without words. Then Emily lifted the harmonica and blew a single note, clear and steady. Sometimes music helps our mouths remember, she explained. She exaggerated her lips. Ah, Ethan mirrored the shapes silently. She pointed toward Andrew. Dad, she mouthed. The boy froze, torn between fear and hope. Andrew stayed still, afraid a single movement would break the fragile moment. Emily tapped again, coaxing gently. Ethan's throat worked, his lips parted, and the faintest sound emerged. D. His eyes widened in shock. Andrew's heart slammed as if struck. Emily steadied him with a nod. Good, let's try again. Ethan tapped blue, green, red, the cups Emily had labeled with sounds. This time, the fragments came together. Da. D. The last consonant was soft, almost imagined, but it was there. Andrew whispered back, I'm here. Ethan's eyes filled, and before anyone could move, he lunged into his father's arms, sobbing into his chest. For the first time since that night on Route 17, Andrew held his son not in silence, but in sound. Tears slid down his face unchecked. Emily busied herself rearranging the cups, giving them the dignity of the moment. When Ethan finally quieted, Andrew noticed a small spiral notebook peeking out from Emily's crate. Pages were filled with handwritten notes, diagrams, and highlighted articles. He caught phrases he recognized: floor time, prosody training. She had cataloged methods professionals used, adapted for her own experiments. He looked at her in awe. You were going to be a speech therapist, he said softly. Emily's eyes flickered, then dropped. I wanted to. But when my dad lost his job and Mom got sick, I had to leave school. I never stopped reading, though. She tried to shrug it off, but the weight of her lost dream hung between them. Andrew felt admiration rise in him, not the kind born from resumes or accolades, but from witnessing resilience. He had seen brilliance in boardrooms, but what Emily carried in a crate of spoons and a tattered harmonica was something rarer. Stubborn, unpolished devotion. He wanted to offer her everything: money, opportunity, credentials, but he knew this wasn't about him fixing her. It was about honoring who she already was. Emily packed away the notebook with quiet finality. It's not magic, she said. It's just meeting him where he is. Ethan tapped the cups again, looking between them proudly. Emily smiled, and Andrew knew this alley had become more than a space behind a diner. It was a sanctuary where his son's voice was being born again. Driving home later, Andrew replayed that whispered word, Dad, like a song. It wasn't polished, but it was real. And for the first time in 2 years, hope didn't feel like a fragile dream. It felt like the start of a conversation. When Andrew finally asked Emily to come to the house, his voice was almost apologetic. He wasn't inviting a waitress. He was inviting the one person who had reached his son in ways money and medicine never could. She hesitated, but Ethan's eager tug at her hand made her agree. That evening the Carter estate, usually sterile and echoing, carried a different energy. Ethan set out his spoon and cups on the living room floor, waiting. Emily crouched beside him, encouraging him with soft rhythms and silly sounds. Andrew watched as his son, once locked in silence, shaped his first full sentence. "Want more juice?" Ethan whispered, halting but whole. Andrew's breath caught. The sound was more precious than any deal he had ever closed. His eyes stung as he poured the glass himself, trying not to cry in front of them both. Later, after Ethan had drifted to sleep, Andrew and Emily sat in the kitchen over cups of coffee. The house felt warmer, less like a mausoleum, more like a place waking up. "I don't know how to thank you," Andrew said. "You've done what no one else could." Emily set her cup down, her fingers restless. "It isn't just me." He was ready. He needed someone who wasn't afraid of his quiet. He studied her, torn between awe and curiosity. "Emily, why did you leave your studies?" "You could have been extraordinary." Her expression shifted, shadows crossing her eyes. "You don't remember, do you?" she asked quietly. Andrew frowned. "Remember what?" Her voice steadied, though it trembled underneath. "My father worked for Carter Technologies, 15 years. He was cut in a restructuring, your restructuring. 1 month's severance and then nothing. My mom was already sick. I had to leave school to work double shifts just to keep us afloat. We lost our house. We lost everything." Andrew felt the words hit like stones in his chest. Memories of boardroom discussions surfaced, charts, percentages, cost-cutting. He had signed the papers, never seeing the faces. And now one sat across from him, stirring sugar into coffee, with hands that had carried consequences he never bore. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that it wasn't personal, that all corporations streamlined. But excuses turned to ash in his throat. He saw the pain she had carried, the years she had lost, and realized that in his world of numbers, she had been one of the forgotten. "Emily, I'm sorry," he said at last, the words sounding inadequate even to him. She shook her head. "You don't owe me, it's done. Life rerouted me. But it's strange, isn't it? I'm helping the boy whose father's decisions destroyed mine. I don't know what to do with that." Andrew leaned forward, voice raw. "I can't undo it. I can't give you back those years, but I see you now. I'm grateful in ways I don't even know how to name." Silence stretched, not empty but weighted. Emily's shoulders softened. "I don't want gratitude," she said. "I just want him to keep talking." The words settled deep inside Andrew. He nodded, humbled. Then, from upstairs, a sound carried through the house. A small, tremulous voice. "Stay." Both froze. For a moment Andrew thought he had imagined it, but then it came again. Stronger. "Stay, Ethan." Andrew bolted up the stairs. Emily closed behind. In the dim light of his room, Ethan sat upright, clutching his spoon, tears streaking his cheeks. "Stay," he repeated, eyes fixed on Emily. The plea cracked Andrew's heart wide open. He knelt, gathering his son in his arms. "I'm here," he whispered. But Ethan reached toward Emily, repeating the word again. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing his hair back. "I'm here too," she murmured. Slowly, Ethan's sobs eased. His body relaxed between them, anchored by presence. Andrew looked across at Emily, their eyes meeting over the boy's head. In that gaze was no blame, no debt, only a recognition that fate had tangled their lives in painful, impossible ways. And yet, through a single word, Ethan had bound them together. 2 days after Ethan's plea for Emily to stay, Andrew sat at his desk with a harmonica beside him and a blank legal pad. For years, the desk had been cluttered with contracts, stock reports, and acquisition plans. That morning, however, he wrote just 3 words at the top of the page: the Lila Carter Fund. Leila's name deserved more than flowers on a grave. It deserved to live in children's voices, in spaces where silence wasn't treated as failure, but as potential. He called his attorney and issued instructions with a clarity his board rarely saw. "This isn't a PR project," he said firmly. "It's not about wings on hospitals or plaques on walls. It's about real tools for families, grants for clinics, scholarships for students, resources for parents who can't buy another hour of therapy. And I want programs for people like Emily, people who never finished school but never stopped learning." When he told Emily later, she didn't glow with excitement the way he imagined. Instead, she grew cautious. They stood in the alley behind the diner, her apron still dusted with flour. "I don't want charity," she said. Her voice was even, but her eyes searched his. Andrew shook his head. "Neither do I. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm asking you to lead. You already know how to reach kids in ways others can't. Help me do this right." She crossed her arms, thoughtful. "Then we do it the slow way, families first, community-led. No savior complexes." Andrew smiled, relieved. "The slow way," he repeated. The launch happened weeks later, not in a ballroom, but in a public library auditorium. Folding chairs replaced velvet seats. A donated microphone sat on a chipped wooden podium, and the banner above them read, "The Leila Carter Fund. Voices worth hearing." Parents filled the room, tired parents, hopeful parents, some clutching their children's hands as if to anchor them in this fragile world. Emily spoke first. She wore the same diner dress beneath a borrowed blazer, refusing to pretend she was anyone other than who she was. "I don't have letters after my name," she began. "I serve coffee and I read articles on my breaks. But I've seen what happens when a child is given patience instead of pressure, when silence is treated as a language instead of a problem. This fund is for that, to give families space, to give kids dignity." When it was Andrew's turn, he didn't bring notes. He simply spoke the truth. "I am a man who once believed money could solve anything. But I couldn't buy back my son's voice. I signed decisions years ago that hurt families like Emily's, because I saw numbers and not names. I can't erase that. What I can do is listen, and use what I have now to make sure fewer children are left unheard." His voice broke when he added, "This is for Leila, this is for Ethan, and this is for every child who deserves to be heard." The applause was not thunderous but steady, the kind of sound that says we believe you. And then something unexpected happened. Ethan, clutching his spoon scepter, rose from his chair and walked to the stage. He tapped the spoon on the microphone stand, then looked out at the sea of faces. For a long, unbearable moment, Andrew thought fear would pull him back into silence. But then Ethan lifted his chin, took a shaky breath, and spoke. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Emily." The room fell into stunned stillness, broken only by the sound of parents weeping quietly into their hands. The words weren't perfect, but they were whole, and they carried farther than any speech Andrew could have written. He met Emily's eyes across the stage, and in that look was something deeper than gratitude, partnership, born not from convenience, but from love and loss reshaped into purpose. That night, back at the Carter house, the rooms no longer felt like tombs. The piano lid was lifted, the kettle whistled without shame, and Ethan hummed softly in the hallway, his new dinosaur book tucked under his arm. Andrew placed the harmonica on the mantel beside Lila's photo, the library flyer, and Emily's scribbled notes. For once, it didn't feel like a shrine. It felt like the start of something alive. As they ate soup at the kitchen island, Ethan read haltingly from his book, his voice shaky but proud. When he finished, he climbed into his father's lap, resting there as if reclaiming childhood. Andrew met Emily's gaze across the table. There was no grand declaration, just the quiet knowledge that they were building a family the slow way, measured, imperfect, but durable as love. In the end, it wasn't money, power, or prestige that gave Ethan his voice back. It was the quiet patience of a waitress who refused to see silence as weakness, and a father who finally learned that love, not wealth, was the real currency of healing. One fragile word, Dad, became the bridge that rebuilt a broken family and birthed a legacy of hope for countless others. This story reminds us that miracles often begin in the most ordinary places. A diner stool, a doodled napkin, a simple act of kindness. If this touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, because your voice too might be the spark that changes someone's world.